Thank you.
Oh, okay, nice. Thank you.
Multifaceted editor, shooter, does it all. Kid does it all. Definitely doesn't want to get his water right on those things. No, I didn't.
They won't turn that light on.
So why not that much better? So we just need a sound test on the speaker.
Okay, hold on.
Just hang up on it.
Okay, go ahead.
Testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing. That's normal voice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Okay, that's very good.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, bye.
We're getting real close.
It's going to be
Before we get started, I just wanted to let you know, the evidence right now, we have an attorney on the line in Boston. We have another attorney on the line in St. Louis Obispo. It's being set up through this phone, this information we just got. Reverend Heber and Jenztsch and myself will be out in about 4 minutes. We'll get started. We're sorry we made you wait this long, but it was a matter of a lot of logistics from different parts of the country.
What attorneys?
It'll be Earle Cooley
Where in Boston?
in Boston and Mr. John Peterson, who is right now in St. Louis Obispo. So we'll be right back.
Two spellings on the name, please.
Jail or is he at a...
He's the president of Church of Scientology.
All right, thank you.
Book alert.
Anybody who wasn't here at the earlier press conference that we had where we announced...
All right, thank you.
Tax,
From what?
yeah, you were earlier press conference.
No, we weren't here.
Okay, so 2 days.
Yeah, Earle Cooley. This is Scott Welch from the Church of Scientology.
My call.
Earle? Yeah, Scott Welch. How you doing? Good. I've got you on a hookup that we're going to get on the speaker box. I'm going to just wait for Ken and So what I'm going to do is put you on the box right now and you can talk, please, make sure everybody can hear you, okay?
Rich, to go up.
Hold on.
To go up.
No,
Give me about 3 seconds.
Mr. Elsa? Your recorder on?
Earle, you there? Earle, are you there? Check that. Earle? Did you talk at all? Oh, okay. Yeah, about 2 or 3 seconds, I'm going to hook you over to the speakerphone and you can just say a couple of words. Okay?
Earle Cooley in Boston.
Good. Earl, can you hear us? Do I have to do that each time I talk to him? Can you hear us, Earl? He's not hearing us.
All right. We'll relay the questions via the phone to him. If there's any questions that you may have, he will be making a statement, and we will go over that.
Well, hang on a second here, so we've got this thing right. Sorry, could you identify? Let me talk to Earl.
Yes.
Earl? Okay. Could you hear us talking at all? Okay, hold on one. Right, hold on one second.
Earl, you can't hear us? Okay, speak.
Earle Cooley in Boston. Hello? Are you able to hear me?
You guys hear him at all?
Could I suggest for TV it would be better anyway if you two gentlemen could relay what he was saying, because to have the TV showing just a little box.
Okay, Earl, what we're going to do, Earl?
Just to portray the information.
What I'm going to do is, there's some mess up on this box. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to have somebody stand here so they can hear each thing that I'm saying and so forth. You can hear it, okay? And then we'll be able to put you on the box and you can talk directly, okay? Okay, very good. Very good. Matt, will you run the phone to Earl, okay, so he can hear this, okay? Go ahead.
I just introduced myself. My name is Reverend Ken Hoden. I'm the president of the Church of Scientology of Los Angeles. Seated to my right is Reverend Heber. He is the president of the Church of Scientology International. I'm going to make a brief statement. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
After we finish, I want to go to the end of your statement and mine.
All right, we'll both make our statements, and then afterwards, if you have any questions, we'll open it up to the floor. I want to make one thing very clear up front. L. Ron Hubbard and the works that he completed in the last 36 years in Dianetics and Scientology is going to affect every man, woman, and child on this earth for easily the next 10,000 years. The goals that he embodied in the book Dianetics, the Modern Science of Mental Health, and the goals that currently exist for the church, and that is a world without war, a world without insanity, and a world without crime, are the goals that this church has. And the enthusiasm that's been generated over the last few days is something that's uncomparable in our history. We intend to achieve those goals. From viewing the media, there's been some controversy. That is going to be laid to rest at this point. Counsel for the church drove to San Luis Obispo today. They presented fingerprints of L. Ron Hubbard's body to the coroner, sheriff's office, and there has been positive identification that the body was in fact the body of L. Ron Hubbard. That matter is closed. The fact that we even have to be addressing that point today is one of the reasons why we called this press conference. You see, the coroner and the sheriff were totally satisfied 2 days ago. A man who spent his entire life trying to help people, providing a spiritual technology that guarantees total spiritual freedom, was somehow brought into controversy by one man and one man alone. Reverend Heber Jenztsch is with us today, and he's going to explain exactly what happened. But before I let him speak, I want to say one thing. There is controversy in this world. Controversy does exist. But in this situation, controversy was created on purpose by one person for a very selfish purpose. Sir, who is that?
I'm going to cover that. Is it all right if I stand up? Can you see me all right if I stand up here?
We can't hear you.
You can't hear me if I'm up here?
No.
All right. Let me say, first of all, I am chagrined, I'm angered, I am incensed that an individual and those backing him would attempt in any way to denigrate the founder of this church by trying to make some sort of allegation, either about us as church members or about Mr. Hubbard. In this room where we're seated, there are hundreds of recognitions for Mr. Hubbard for drug rehabilitation, educational capabilities, a great scholar, a great writer, a great humanitarian, and the founder of our religion. So I am concerned when 6 million people's belief systems and activities and happiness is somehow threatened by what has been, up until this point, a pretty secret cabal. Now I'm going to have for each of you documentation, and what I give to you will be documented. Because we have just completed a major investigation into this entire assault on our religion over the last 6 years. So what I say to you now is not idly constituted, idly constructed. It's put together after a good deal of thorough research. And I invite the media to start following down those particular items. But let me bring up the person. Who is it? A lawyer from Boston, Mr. Michael Flynn, who has instituted $1.2 billion worth of suits against my church and against its founder. Now, Mr. Hoden has dealt with the whole issue of the controversy over Mr. Hubbard and his decision to leave this life. And now I have had several media over the last 24, 36 hours calling me and saying, well, Mr. Flynn has other thoughts on this. So let me just cover who this man is, and I'll give you the documentation. Because if you know us, and you know us as a church, we document what we have, and we put it down piece by piece by piece by piece. And we don't have to make any allegation which is not backed up. So let's go to this issue. In November of 1982, Mr. Flynn attempted to seize the entire estate of L. Ron Hubbard through a probate petition that he brought out here in Riverside, California. And he brought it in behalf of the estranged and disinherited son, one Ron DeWolf. At that time, Flynn alleged that Mr. Hubbard, who at that time was alive and well, was dead. Now, of course, he alleges it's the opposite. Now he says it's a hoax. So whatever serves his purpose, he'll go for. But in March of 1983, Flynn was disqualified from representing DeWolf in that court out there in Riverside because of his conflict of interest in the proceeding. He was ostensibly representing the disinherited son of Mr. Hubbard. To take away the assets from the wife and all the children, of course, didn't bother him. And then he was suing Mr. Hubbard at the same time, and the Church of Scientology, for hundreds of millions of dollars. We have that document. In June of 1983, the probate petition was thrown out as baseless, and the court granting a summary judgment motion saying Mr. Hubbard had his right to privacy. This is America. He has his right to privacy. It was thrown out as baseless. In July, the same court held Michael Flynn in criminal contempt for having illegally disseminated private, confidential, and court-sealed materials relating to Mr. Hubbard's finances. In July 1984, investigators for the church uncovered and documented that Flynn had masterminded a criminal conspiracy in June of 1982. In order to set up the facts for this whole case, what he was involved in was an attempt, and he forged a $2 million check, or he was involved in a $2 million check forgery on Mr. Hubbard's personal accounts, which fortunately we were able to stop. But we found in an investigation a year later the conspirators. And I have the affidavits of Ala Fadili Tamimi, who was the co-conspirator with Mr. Flynn to do that particular action. We took that information to the FBI. We've taken it to Justice Department officials in Boston. It is part of a current ongoing investigation of grand jury proportions. Mr. Cooley can deal with that if that's necessary to answer any further thing on that. Now, recent shocking revelations indicate that Flynn was not alone in perpetrating these criminal acts. In the deposition of one Jerry Armstrong, a Flynn client, it was revealed that just 10 days before the filing of this petition, in November of '82, Flynn, Armstrong, and Mr. DeWolf, the disinherited son of Mr. Hubbard, met at the palatial estate of one Abby Moz Rockefeller O'Neill to discuss litigation. Armstrong later changed his story and stated that he was only at the O'Neill Oyster Bay, New York compound to discuss Scientology in general. Flynn and Rockefeller lawyers stymied any further legal inquiries we made into the details of that meeting through constructing a whole phony attorney-client relationship between all persons present. Now, Flynn has denied on many occasions that he has received any funding for his litigation and specifically for his probate scam. Now, some of you may find that in the media, some of you may have followed it. I will tell you this, he's said this in debates that I've had with him on media. Oh, I don't get any money at all. He stood down here in court, in Superior Los Angeles court, and said he's just a poor man who has no money. Well, we decided to find out who is funding Mr. Flynn. Who is funding him to destroy the First Amendment rights of a religious group and other religious groups in the United States. Documents recently uncovered show that during the years of 1983 and 1984, Michael Flynn was the recipient of at least $135,000 that we traced immediately in covert laundered funding from the Rockefeller interests who discussed the litigation strategy of the probate scam prior to the petition being filed. In other words, a church investigator in New York recently discovered that $135,000 was funneled through the New York Community Trust of New York City to the Scientology Victims Defense Fund, care of Michael Flynn. He gets the money. And this was on the heels of Flynn completing his black propaganda work on the first probate issue. Now let me just show you what this comes down to. We traced it down. We have the publications, folks. So what we have is in the New York Community Trust. This is a publication. It is a public document. We found that there, Mrs. Lawrence Rockefeller, who was in charge of distributing the money, and this $350 million trust has been funding Michael Flynn for this litigation. We also have the IRS documents to indicate that Mr. Flynn indeed is the recipient of those funds. We have the documents indicating that this is to be used to pay media, to pay writers, to do anti-Scientology materials. I don't know what he's done with that. That is the issue. But we sent a private attorney into this area, and he found that the Constellation Fund, Herr Richard Parsons, Esquire, this is a secret man who wished to remain anonymous, was the man who distributed the money from this fund to the New York Community Trust Fund, and then it went here. Mr. Richard Parsons, Esquire, is attorney for Rockefeller Brothers Fund, and George O'Neill, who I mentioned the wife of earlier. Mr. Richard Parsons, Esquire, was chief counsel for Nelson Rockefeller. Mr. Flynn has excellent funding for what he's doing against religion in this country. We know, we have the documentation. The chairman of that distribution committee, as I said, is a close relative of Abby Moz O'Neill, the wife of Mr. Lawrence Rockefeller. And we were puzzled how an IRS recognized tax-exempt trust worth over $350 million could get away with funding a personal injury lawyer who was attempting to collect $1.2 billion from this church and its founder. So we inquired further. And we found that at the New York Community Trust, as I indicated to you, there was a decision. Documents obtained from the New York Community Trust explain that the New York Community Trust handles over $350 million, as I indicated to you. He found the whole issue when he asked the lady in charge of the fund. She brought it up on her computer screen. It had a secret number. He saw the number, verified the number. The number also indicated it went to Mr. Parsons. Now, not knowing that the investigator was representing the church, that's why she brought it up on the screen. Parsons has refused to allow his client at the deposition to answer any questions as to the contents of his communications with Flynn. We've tried to trace this down. There's no particular thing. But we have all the overt evidence on this. Subsequent investigation has shown that while the IRS has consistently challenged every Church of Scientology's tax-exempt application. It has allowed this recipient trust organization to illegally launder funds. Michael Flynn's fund. And the originator and launderer of the dirty money, Parsons and the Constellation Fund, and the New York Community Trust, respectively. These exemptions continue despite the fact that Flynn has violated the law by not filing yearly financial statements required by IRS code. For any year the Scientology Fund has been in existence. We have the IRS documents indicating he has not filed for those years. He is supposed to by law. He has not done it. The trust has not done it. They're in violation of those agreements. They're in violation of IRS law, and the IRS goes, hey, that's great. We'll just go after the Church of Scientology, and anybody who attacks them, you've got tax-exempt status. That's criminal. That is totally in violation of the separation of church and state, because IRS then says this religion shall die and these people shall continue to exist. That is in violation of our rights. 6 million people, you can't do it. They did it in Nazi Germany. They're not going to do it here. Now, further investigation has also uncovered the fact that there is no duly incorporated nor registered Constellation Fund in the state of New York, and it's not been one of similar names since the 70s. Let me say this in closing, and then you can ask any questions you want. I'm angry because we had to dig up all of this information ourselves. It didn't come from the IRS, those criminal elements of the IRS, who we have had to fight for 30 years for our existence. And we've won by bit by bit by bit with those people. It didn't come from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who has attacked us since day one. Now, this Rockefeller backing and perpetration of criminality is not surprising when one considers that L. Ron Hubbard nearly single-handedly defeated Nelson Rockefeller's proposed Siberian Bill legislation in the mid-50s. Mr. Rockefeller used the services of one Dr. Arnold Hutschnecker, a graduate from Kaiser Wilhelm Nazi Institute, 1926. I know because I've talked to the man. And they drafted a proposal to take hundreds of thousands of Americans and send them to Alaska. We called it the Siberian Bill. Take away the rights of individuals and just send them off on anyone's allegation that they are mentally incompetent. Well, we didn't sabotage, we sacked that bill because it was against the Constitution of the United States. This bill called for concentration camps there, etc. Let me say this. Rockefeller backed that whole proposed liberal conservatorship laws be done. Without question, the Rockefellers backed Adolf Hitler during World War II, and they're continuing this tradition at the present time by backing straw men who attack religious men and churches. So let it be known, we will vindicate Mr. Hubbard's good name regardless of how many Rockefeller megabucks are poured into this assault on religion. I vow to you today, I and the staffs and good Scientologists everywhere are going to bring an end to this. Mr. Hubbard has contributed greatly to millions of people. I think you should know we have the documents available for you. You have my statement, which I've just basically gone over, paraphrased. I think it's time to put all those issues to rest. Now, any questions?
I have one statement to make before we have a question.
Okay.
We've talked a little bit about the controversy. I guarantee you every article that you've ever read over the last 2 days, every wire story, every TV story, every single one, and every allegation, and every type of controversy that may have arisen, if you were to trace each source down, it only comes to one person, and if you call him up, he doesn't have one document.
Just allegations.
Just allegations. We've made some allegations today. We have some documents to back them up. And all controversy aside, the 6 million Scientologists across this world that loved L. Ron Hubbard, that love him today, that were helped by his work, in comparison to the few yapping dogs that spit conspiracy, that could spit controversy, the comparison of the two is this a little speck of dust in someone's eye.
Maybe you could clear up one question which she is posing to the county authorities there in San Luis Obispo. She's asking two questions. Number one, if Mr. Hubbard was a dying man in the last few days and was attended by a physician at that time, why wasn't he hospitalized? And why was there an 11-hour wait before his death was reported to the county authorities?
Mr. Hubbard, Earle Cooley
Was actually there.
was actually there.
He
Can we
answer those
put
questions.
Earle on that? Earle, did you hear that question? Earle, did you hear that question? Earle? Hello, Earle? Is he? No, I don't have anything there.
I will give you the
Earl?
information that I do have, and we'll hook it up. This we know. On Friday night at 8 p.m., L. Ron Hubbard discarded his body in his sleep. Technical term for it is some stroke. Several days before that, he was out and walking about. There was a doctor there in attendance with him at all times. When they woke him up and they found that he had discarded his body, immediately the attorneys were called.
Earl?
At which time, very strict instructions were given. The attorneys immediately got on a plane and flew to St. Louis Obispo. They went to L. Ron Hubbard's home, at which time they immediately contacted the authorities. They immediately contacted the coroner. The sheriff's office was immediately contacted. These people were brought out to his very spacious ranch. At which time, at that point, the entire body of L. Ron Hubbard was turned over to the authorities. And it was only after the authorities had done the checks that are legally necessary was the body cremated for the wishes of L. Ron Hubbard and his will.
Mr. Earle Cooley followed that entire process all the way through. I realize that Mr. Flynn feels terribly, terribly disenchanted that he can't get $1.2 billion. So he's going to have to create this controversy. California law says a person has a right to have his body cremated, and it's within a certain period of time, very short amount of time, as a matter of fact. He also has the right to refuse an autopsy if he wishes so, for his own religious purposes. Mr. Hubbard decided to do that as well.
Is it true that he signed those documents, Mr. Jenztsch, requesting that no autopsy be performed only 4 days before he died?
That is not correct.
I don't have
When was the
information
document
personally.
signed?
Yes. Okay, Earl's got something to
Good.
say.
If we could
Earle,
get
can
him
you hear this?
there.
They want to know about, you know, the time lapse. One of the fellows here who's been talking to Mr. Flynn and has accepted Mr. Flynn's data evidently feels that he wants to know the question about the disposition, time difference from when Mr. Hubbard left the body and when there was action taken to get to the coroner, and then I think basically that what else?
First of all, I'm not taking Mr. Flynn's case, but it's
Well,
been
I
stated
saw the
earlier
news
that
text, but anyway,
it was a dying, that Mr. Hubbard was a dying man.
Oh yeah, he
Very
wanted
sick,
to know
and
when he signed
why
the...
was he not hospitalized? If,
I want to know why he wasn't
found so
hospitalized,
bad?
or why there wasn't some sort of, when was the document signed that he wanted the body, I guess, cremated and no autopsy, okay? I'll let you speak. Over to you. Go over here.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Earl?
Am I coming through?
Yeah, you're coming through fine, go ahead.
Talk.
This is Earle Cooley in Boston. I'm not able to hear what is going on that end. But Reverend Jenztsch has just indicated to me that there is a question that has been put by the press as to the period of time between the time Mr. Hubbard departed at 8 p.m. on the 24th of January and the time that the officials were notified. That was done at my express instruction because I was in Los Angeles and had to drive to the scene. I did not get there until 6:30 in the morning. The reason that I instructed that nothing be done until I got there was that I was under the responsibility of seeing to it that Mr. Hubbard's last wishes were carried out with respect to the disposition of his remains. Those last wishes were that he be cremated and that his ashes be scattered at sea, and that specifically there be no autopsy done on his body. Now, it is very important for people to understand that these instructions from Mr. Hubbard were not only the instructions that were contained in the will that was executed shortly before he departed. but were instructions that dated back several years in a codicil that he had executed to his previous will. The more recent will merely incorporated into the new will the codicil that had been in a separate document and made it all part of one will. In addition, the new will made additional provisions for additional money to be left to his wife. So anybody who suggests that this was a recent instruction from Mr. Hubbard is completely in error. This was Mr. Hubbard's instruction with respect to the disposition of his body for a number of years. Now, I have just received notification from San Luis Obispo that the certified copies of the fingerprints of Earle Hubbard from the Department of Justice and the FBI were furnished to the Sheriff's Department in San Luis Obispo. That the Sheriff's Department confirmed with the Department of Justice and FBI that the fingerprints that were certified were indeed those of Earle Hubbard. Those fingerprints were then compared with Mr. Hubbard's fingerprints that were taken from the body by the coroner on Saturday, January 25th. The fingerprint expert in the Sheriff's Department has confirmed beyond any question that the fingerprints on the body that was cremated are the fingerprints of Earle Hubbard, and therefore this matter is closed.
I don't want to badger you or anything, but I'm just raising some questions that have already been raised by others.
Mr. Flynn, let's
Mr. Flynn.
very specific.
Mr. Flynn, exactly.
Exactly.
The ranch, as I understand, it's about 30 miles from San Luis Obispo, a rather isolated area. Why was a dying, very sick man kept there and not moved to a hospital?
Oh, he's saying, why was a dying, very sick man kept at a ranch away from the city and rather than being moved to a hospital? Hang on. Okay, give me 3 seconds and you're on.
Could I also ask him about the new will, when Mr. Hubbard wrote that?
Not a new will, codicil. Do you know what a codicil is?
Maybe he could explain it to us
Okay,
exactly what
I
was
understand.
written.
Codicil.
If I could interrupt for 1 second, the
Yes.
Sheriff of San Luis Obispo says to what stopped the autopsy was a certificate.
Did you speak to the sheriff in the last 20 minutes?
I spoke to him yesterday.
No, this is within the last half hour. Mr.
Well,
Cooley.
I'm talking about the certificate of religious belief, not the fingerprint.
Okay.
Does that change?
Hang on, Earl.
He said it was dated January 20th.
He's saying, one lady is saying that the wish for the no autopsy was January 20th. Hang on, I'm going to turn you back on. There's a couple of media here from NBC. Ma'am, where are you from?
The Washington Post.
Washington Post. Okay, Washington Post and NBC TV. Am I correct? NBC? Okay. Back over.
Hello?
Tell him that he's on.
Earl? So 3 seconds and you're on.
Sorry for this.
I understand that someone has raised the question of why Mr. Hubbard was not brought to a hospital. Number one, that was not his wish. Number two, he was constantly attended by a physician. Number three, the cerebral vascular accident that he has sustained was a matter that was not subject to being treated by a hospital. Until that occurred, he was not an ill man. Mr. Hubbard was not a sick and dying man. If you will understand that in Scientology, you are now being confronted with religious technology about which you know very little. But insofar as Scientology technology is concerned, Mr. Hubbard made a conscious decision to discard his body now that his work on Earth was completed. In Scientology, the body is not the being. The being lives on. Mr. Hubbard chose the method of discarding his body, and the method that he chose was to allow this to happen. His doctor has confirmed the cause of death. The coroner and the Sheriff's Department in San Luis Obispo has confirmed the cause of that death. They have confirmed that Mr. Hubbard had absolutely no toxic substances in his blood. There was a completely negative toxicology scan done on blood that was taken in my presence from that body, and the fingerprints of that body have been confirmed as being those of Earle Hubbard by comparison with official fingerprints from the FBI and the and the dirtying of the name of Earle Hubbard, a man revered by 6 million people. And it's a disgraceful performance that ought to be terminated immediately. And it seems to me that any responsible members of the press who can confirm these facts very simply with the officials of San Luis Obispo County ought to cease to even be granted by me, and that blood was drawn in my presence, and we did not cremate the body until we had the results of the examination by the hematologist of that blood. That examination came back completely negative for any drugs or toxic substances in Mr. Hubbard's blood. Mr. Hubbard's body was then fingerprinted in my presence, all digits of both hands. Those fingerprints have now established beyond any question that the body that was cremated, once again, in my presence and in the presence of John Pierce, was the body of Earle Hubbard.
When was the, has he said, did I miss it, when the new will was executed? What day?
They need to.
And where?
You want to know, when was the new will executed and where? A couple of days before he departed in San Luis Obispo?
But exactly what day? I mean, certainly he knows the date.
The ranch where he was. Do we have the exact date? Either the 22nd or the 23rd.
Don't you people have a copy of the will? Doesn't he have a copy of the will?
Well, it's, he said, don't we have a copy of the will? I think it's, no, he doesn't have a copy there.
When will the will be filed?
It'll be offered for probate, and then
Does he know when?
the coroner had a copy of the will.
Does he know when the will will be filed?
He wants to know when the will be filed. Or Mr. Flynn wants to know something. It's up to the, it's really up to the people who handle the estate, Mr. Partner. It's up to them when they decide to do that. It'll be very soon. The executors will carry that out.
You say he departed Friday night, but when did he actually suffer the stroke?
He said, one lady said, that you said he departed Friday night, but when did he actually suffer the stroke? Has no one here gotten a copy of the death certificate? Ah, okay, no one here has a copy of the death certificate.
While he's...
It says 8 p.m., January 24th is the time, and he departed.
But the question is about...
It says onset of condition, go ahead.
Thanks.
That culminated and resulted in the death. That's stated to be 1 week prior. The onset.
Is it
Right.
is it Mr. Is it his
This is Mr.
understanding? Is it Mr. Cooley's understanding that that was the stroke, the quote-unquote onset of the condition?
The original question was, when did the stroke occur? Is that correct?
Right.
He says a cerebral vascular accident can occur, but one can feel, start on an onset, and then you don't necessarily feel the aspects of it immediately, but over a long period of time, it could be whatever. It's not. Dr. Denk noted symptoms consistent with that about a week before.
In other words, they didn't know at the time he had it, he had it. They only found out about it.
Well, they found about it. He was very lucid and analytical and working until the end.
Excuse me, I have a question that either one of you will answer. I don't think it's necessary for Mr. Cooley to answer, but it's up to you. I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying correctly.
We're getting another
If
question
I understand
here.
what you said, he decided to depart his body because he had completed his work here. And then he did so by allowing this medical process to happen.
Let me explain.
Did he will the stroke? Is that what you're saying?
Well, here's what we're saying. In Dianetics and Scientology, we consider a person to be a spirit. And that person has a body. But sometimes it's commonly referred to in this country that you have a spirit. That's not the way we view it in Dianetics and Scientology. And that's not the way that we know that it is. we consider that a person is a spirit and that he resides within a body, and that when the body dies or is discarded as an old pair of shoes, that person continues living on. All right?
Let me just sort of finish up here. We can go on for hours and hours and hours. I think we've supplied the documentation, so forth and so on. I just want to indicate to the media that I'm deeply concerned about the people who back this kind of campaign, who started it. We've identified who those people are. We've identified their multi-million-dollar funding, and we've identified the process by which that has been done. No one else has ever done that, and the support they've had by the inaction of the Internal Revenue Service is very, very clear on all of this, and I believe that we have some very serious legal grounds to go against the Internal Revenue Service, and we have very serious legal grounds to go against the Rockefellers for this kind of thing. Now, the speculation will probably continue because I can see that Mr. Flynn has created quite a brouhaha here, but I'm going to end the conference at this particular point. If you wish to talk to Mr. Hoden and I separately out here, fine.
Just finally,
you've had about 15 questions now.
Exactly, but they've all been answered over the speakerphone.
I understand, and I want to be helpful to you, but I also see you running Mr. Flynn willy-nilly with no documentation, and I'm just trying to tell you the man is not credible. The man has never been credible, and if you investigate the documents, which I would be very willing to give to you, and ask Mr. Flynn about that, I think he should be confronted with that, and ask him for any counter-documentation, I will feel that there's a fairness and a balance here. I don't wish to take issue with you one-on-one, but I think at this particular point, the credibility of the man is very, very questionable because of his track record, and that's well established. So,
but what about and this is what I wanted to ask you, the issue, and I don't want to hear it over the speaker.
He doesn't want to hear it from you anymore.
I'd like to hear it from you because I think you can speak to this.
That's what he's saying.
What about the issue of the request for a coroner's inquest in this case, which is being made today? What do you feel personally about that issue?
I think we've expressed what our feelings are.
I think that the $350 million backing of Mr. Flynn behind that particular perpetration and that particular concept is the real motivation behind it. There is not one modicum of decency, not one modicum of care or anything else except an avaricious, greedy desire to somehow go in and go after those particular assets. But let me tell you this, those people who are doing it in the past were trying to attack Mr. Hubbard, and they tried to attack him because he was not available, he was doing his own particular research. Well, he's not here anymore. You know who they're going to have to deal with, who they've avoided all along? They're going to have to deal with us, the church. And we're coming after them. And we'll go after them. They want to deal with us, we'll deal with it one-on-one with them. The same group, the same people. Because we know a lot more than what I just gave you here. But we know this much, and that's plenty for us to start with right now. But I'm telling you, Mr. Hubbard was a close, wonderful, personal friend of 6 million people. And that cannot change regardless of a couple people yelling over the back fence who want his money, his estate in some way, some shape or form. He's well funded, $350 million in megabucks. That's okay. We'll take him on. And that's my
I have a
final
question
comment.
for Mr. Cooley.
One question, I guess. Earl, you still there? One last question.
You mentioned during this news conference how the church, in your perception, was under assault by the Internal Revenue Service. In the past few months, has the Internal Revenue Service also begun an intensive investigation of Mr. Hubbard and his estate and his tax returns?
They have indicated no particular issue on that. His tax returns have been filed every single year. There's never been any particular thing against Mr. Hubbard in any of that time.
In the last 2 months.
Well, I see something where there's an attempt to say there's some sort of grand jury. We've not been notified of any such things,
Well,
etc.
we have a direct quote. CNN. After this whole thing settled down, and it was determined that it was Elrond's body, it was time for a new game, no controversy. So Flynn calls one of you up. I don't know who it was, but you decided to put it on all the wires. Then the next big thing was that whole mess. The fact of the matter, that has also been confirmed by CNN as being totally false. Dead issue, over.
Well,
done.
here's the whole thing on the Internal Revenue Service. Mr. Hubbard and myself were put on an enemies list in 1973. And I can guarantee you, they haven't stopped hounding me, and they haven't stopped hounding him, and they haven't stopped hounding the other people who are on that list. And that is a fact. But I'll tell you this, we've started our own investigation into the Criminal Investigations Division of the Internal Revenue Service. And we found some very shocking activities in there, criminal activities. And we'll complete that very shortly and see that it goes to the right authorities. I don't think the IRS is the right one to do it.
But would you ask Mr. Cooley if in the last 2 months they've
He
begun
wants
to
to know if the
request
last 2
data?
months there's been some sort of IRS investigation of Mr. Hubbard's tax returns and so forth. Earl? That's what he wants to know. Has there been some sort of investigation of Mr. Hubbard in the last couple of months? An investigation, he said, for the last 20 years. Mr. Cooley says an investigation for the last 20 years, not only of Mr. Hubbard, but the Church of Scientology.
Nothing new.
It's nothing new. It's the same thing. They've been trying to do this for, it's longer, since 1957, Earl. But that's it, okay? Exactly. My final comment is just as Mr. Cooley said, if there's to be an indictment, it won't be against L. Ron Hubbard, and if it's to be in anybody in the church, let him do it, we'll handle it, we'll take him on. Okay? We're here. We're willing to take on the Internal Revenue Service.
Are you going after them, or are you waiting to hear from them?
No, we're going to go after the IRS. We're already investigating them. Very thoroughly.
Before the death, have you heard anything about a indictment of Mr. Hubbard?
I have heard of no indictment of Mr. Hubbard.
CNN called the Justice Department and the IRS. They're running it on national TV 1 hour ago. There is nothing. Call CNN, national news in Atlanta. They did the investigation.
Now, how do you get an indictment when you haven't had a grand jury, folks? Come on, you have to have a grand jury and then you get an indictment, right? Well, Mr. Flynn seems to have forgotten about that and left out the whole grand jury. You don't get an indictment without a grand jury. Well, there isn't an indictment. Oh, well, okay, the press says it's not true. That's not the way it goes. Okay. This guy's saying it's not true. You don't need to do that. You don't need to grab a grand jury, he says.
always need a grand jury for your In California, there's even...
Well, Mr. Cooley says that you... he says the DA can do it.
That's what they said. They called
Earl, it's just, we're covered on this thing. I think we're just going to end off at this particular point, so I appreciate you coming in on it. If there's any other questions, we'll sort of answer them outside here, but if I need to touch base with you, we'll give you a call back, okay? Let me give you Mr. Cooley's phone number, okay? Earl, what's the phone number back there? Area